When the choice seems to be to tear down the church
or build a wall around it,
we aim to walk the narrow road of nuance
through the wilderness between the warring factions
and try to figure out what it means
to love God
and people well. I don't know, man. Things have gotten busy.
Yeah.
Not that they haven't been, but just everything's kind of, I don't know, the holidays didn't really slow down. It was a little different this year.
No.
Kind of when we did things, and not that it was bad by any means, it's just it didn't allow me as much downtime as I usually feel like I have during the holidays.
It's the old thing of like needing a vacation from your vacation because the vacation wasn't all that restful.
That's real. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
And there's times, and we've talked about this before, like just the amount of things you think about when you have the chance on vacation. Even if it's like a chill vacation, and you know, some of the ones we do where we're out in the middle of nowhere and I feel like I have time to think, well then it's like you get home and now what? Like I thought about all this stuff.
Yeah, what am I going to do?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And I think going into the holidays I felt like it was going to be like, okay, I'll have a little bit of downtime, I'll be able to reset and kind of start, and I don't know that I fully reset, whatever that means.
Not so much, huh?
Yeah,
I get that. Something I've been trying to do lately is like I have this thing where I'll get to the end of the day, and the days tend to be pretty long and full of different things. Most of them good, honestly, but even the doing of good things requires energy and effort and brain space and, you know, and all that kind of thing. And so I'll get to the end of the day, and the stuff that I enjoy doing is stuff like reading or working on music or even, you know, working on projects for other creative people that are outside of work or, you know, things like that. And the problem is all those require more work and more brain space.
Yeah.
So something I've been trying to do lately, and quick caveat. So what I often end up doing is just, you know, you end up scrolling on your phone, or you end up, you know, watching something that doesn't mean anything, not something bad, or, you know, you play a game on the computer, and all those things are fine. But then you get to the end of the evening and it's like, well, crap, I didn't do anything that was worth a dang.
Right.
And so it's like, well, I do need to rest and not like engage I do want to have a moment where I can actually rest and not feel like I'm having to be responsible for something.
Yeah.
And so what I've been doing is, this is going to sound dumb, is literally just sitting. So I'm not on my phone. I'm not reading anything. I find a spot and I just sit there.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful.
Like just any spot. Like,
yeah, I mean, on the couch, or it's too cold to sit outside right now. But even like, I love doing fire pits, but even that is, you know, you got to start the thing in a certain time, and it's got to burn low by a certain time, or you got to, it just becomes another job if you're not careful. So it's just like, I'm literally going to sit and just let my mind wander for, you know, 15 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever. And it's actually been pretty helpful. I would encourage everybody to take a minute and just sit and, you know, pray if you want to, but there's actually a lot of freedom in like, I'm going to set aside this time, because it's on purpose, to just be for a minute.
Yeah.
And just kind of see and then after however long, you get up and you get back to the other things that you were doing. But I've found that helpful. So,
is that your New Year resolution?
Yeah, I was about to say, we've talked about, we had an entire episode about how angry Ryan gets about New Year's resolutions. I'm kidding. He doesn't really get angry. Yeah. But just that, well, I'm trying to, and it wasn't even a New Year thing. It started a few weeks ago, but just that, like, seems to be producing good results so far. So I'm going to try and build more of that in my rhythm.
Well, and I think that's important. It's things that allow you to, I don't know if decompress is the word. Maybe it is.
Maybe so,
it's probably a word I didn't like in the past, but now I'm like, no, there's times that's for real necessary or needed when you've got so much going on during the day. Because, I mean, you can relate. There's times where when the day is over and I'm just trying to sit down and, you know, spend time with the kiddos, and even little things, it's just like I can't, are a struggle to deal with.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know what, give me a minute. Like, just
yeah.
because there's a lot. And I'm a fairly, in the past more so, fairly easygoing, you know, chill person. But, you know, there's a point where if you're not allowing space for the things that you mentioned, just to sit and be and relax, like it can get overwhelming quickly.
It can. I get to the point at the end of the day where I have trouble stringing sentences together, literally.
Yeah.
Like I'll start to, my speech will start to slow down, and I'll have trouble picking what words to use, which, I mean, and I communicate all day, every day. And that's part of it, is like you're using those muscles, those faculties. Your attention and input is demanded on a variety of fronts. And, you know, your family are people, so they require input, you know, they require your faculties. And so trying to strike a balance between availability, but also making sure that I have something in my tank in order to be available.
Yeah, it's difficult if you don't, right?
Yep.
I had that yesterday a little bit. I had a meeting that, it was one of those things where I had a meeting Wednesday where we talked about some stuff, and the general, you know, output of that meeting from my boss was, hey, we need to talk about that quickly. I was like, okay, I'll try and get something, you know, here within the week. He's like, no, like this week. I'm like, okay. And you look at calendars and it's like, oh, cool. So we have this 30-minute slot, which happened to be 4:30 to 5 yesterday. Yeah. And it's like, so I'm giving people less than 24 hours to, you know, to kind of figure this out and come. But by the end of the day, with everything else that had gone on, I found myself struggling just to get through that meeting. I mean, it was fine, but it's like, man, I want to be anywhere but here doing anything but, you know, trying to communicate this effectively. And,
yeah.
You know, it's a thing.
It's no small wonder that Jesus like went out on a boat or went up in the hills by himself from time to time.
Yeah. No kidding. I'm all for, you know,
or took
getting
a boat,
away by yourself. But
took a boat into the hills. That's a little harder.
It is, you know. There's maybe some places you can do that, but
yeah. So every year for the past 2 or 3 years now, we have had kind of a year in review or a year recap, and sometimes we just recap the conversations that we've had that year or the things that went on in our lives. Or, you know, one year we talked about New Year's resolutions and how maybe they miss some of the mark of what we as people of faith are called to do in thinking about our year, and just tried to kind of make sense of some of those things. So I don't come into this conversation with a particular angle in mind necessarily. I don't know if you do, but just that I kind of like this rhythm of reflection. And I've been going back and listening to a bunch of the episodes we put out this year to just kind of see, so what were we thinking? And I've been surprised a few times at, I didn't remember we went there, or man, I needed to be reminded of those things that I said then, or those things that you shared with me then. It's just, it's an interesting experience.
Yeah. And it is, because I think, you know, this year or this past year, we probably recorded more than we have in the past. Mm-hmm. Not as much as we wanted to necessarily, but more so than we have. And so it is easy to kind of miss that and not realize, like, oh man, we went there. Mm-hmm. Is there anything specific that kind of was just like super intriguing, or just overall it was just a unique experience?
Yeah, it's funny. We so much of our lives go in cycles where we're trying to make sense of more or less the same things, and maybe making like 3.5% progress every time around. You know, at least I feel that's the way I feel for me, for the stuff that I struggle with. And so hearing me talk a few months ago about some sense I have made of a little bit of what we were just talking about, of trying to build healthy rhythms and healthy space, both for yourself and for the people that you care about, and not getting bogged down in the minutia of every day, and finding the ways to rest that actually contribute to your godliness rather than just, you know, selfish escapism and things like that. So I was listening to myself say things that I said I had learned, and then, you know, a few months later have apparently forgotten that were helpful at the time. And I'm just like, man, I'm the dude that looks himself in a mirror and then goes off and does the thing that he said he wouldn't do. And I'm thankful for the grace and the closeness of God, and have been kind of reminded lately of some of those things that I that God proved so strongly to me, if you like, about how close he is and the ways in which he wants to be right up in the midst of whatever trouble we're going through, or the good that we're going through as well. And so it was a good kind of, it's good to see where you've been, I guess is what I'd say about it, and see that God was there too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's even a humbling thing, right? Like realizing, okay, I had this realization and said these things, and then looking back, maybe I wasn't always focused on that. And I for sure can struggle with that. I think a big thing looking at the year for me too is just like trying to learn to, we talked about it on the last episode that we released just a little bit ago. But, looking at the blessed or the merciful, and there's times where I may have strong feelings a certain way, or God has revealed something to me, and it's instantly, well, man, everybody should realize this. And maybe so, right? If it's biblical and something God wants to reveal to people, sure. But that doesn't always mean it's going to be in the same time or look the same way. And I'll have that realization of I need to have more mercy here. But then in the moment, it's very easy to be like, what's this fool doing? And I don't want to be that way. I don't want to think that we're on the same place, because, for every time I say that, there could be 5 other people looking at me and being like, why is he doing this when God's word says this? And I would hope someone would graciously pull me to the side and mercifully set me right on that. If it's someone in my community or someone that feels they can, or not. Sometimes it's maybe a stranger that God speaks through. But yeah, what's that?
A donkey.
A donkey. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I may need that, but and I can be a donkey at times, But
I see what you did there.
Oh, but yeah, I mean, I don't know, and it's kind of one of those things. Well, what's going to be? I hate to say the theme, but what is it this year that God's gonna reveal to you? Because I think last year, the last 2 years have been different. Coming out of the end of year before last, I'd kind of followed God's direction into what I thought was. I do think God was leading me there. I don't want to say what I thought. I firmly believe God led me to that new career and whatnot, and trying to pursue that, but I don't think it was for the reasons I wanted, right? It was for something different entirely that was not on my radar. And I think that was a good way of resetting me to show me it's not about my plans. It's about God's plan, and he will put me wherever he wants to in that, and I need to be okay with that. And then this past year was kind of settling back into some of that and where I was before, and again, God's grace that things worked the way they did, total God thing, but it's just different, and then trying to realize that God took me one place and then back as a part of his plan, and what does that mean, and how do I navigate that, not as I messed up and didn't listen, because I do believe I did, but it's just God's doing something different there. And some of that I've seen, some of that I haven't.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with a couple of folks this week that, and we were talking about that they moved to another city for a while and then ended up moving back here. And it's funny the way that they refer to that period of life is like, well, what do you think that was? Because it ended up not being what they expected and whatnot, and it's just kind of like, well, we did what we felt God was calling us to do, and maybe that was the point of it, because we're not sure what any other point would have been.
Yeah, sometimes it's just about obedience, and who knows, maybe you cross paths with someone during that time. I certainly know that was the case for me. There were a couple of people I crossed paths with that I keep in touch with, and have become kind of regular people I communicate with, that I would not have had that, if not for stepping into that role. And maybe that's part of it. there's also people I didn't really want to communicate with that I ended up communicating with during that time, and that's a whole other thing entirely. But maybe that's even part of it. Is God showing you, hey, you're gonna deal with whoever I put in your path, whether you want to or not. And
Paul talks about, I think this is in 1 Corinthians, some water, some plant, some see the harvest. And,
right.
He may ask you to do something and you may never know what it's for. You
Absolutely.
may never see the return on it, but he knows what's up. And it's great to get to be there when something good does happen.
Yep. And some of that you see, little glimpses. I every now and then I see glimpses of kind of that year of 22 and why and what and and it makes sense. I mean, some of it even just little things like to have a little more flexibility for that year.
Yeah.
To kind of explore, to start, little things I did or whatnot. And there's other stuff. It's like, who knows? But maybe there was something like that where there was a conversation with someone or, who knows, where they feel able to reach out in a time of need.
Mm-hmm.
And that should be worth it, whether it's inconvenient or not. It should be what it's about. So.
Yeah, talking about flexibility, I ran a business for a while, and you're your own boss, but the buck still stops with you, Mm-hmm. You're ultimately responsible for everything. There have been quite a few times over the last couple of years since switching to working for somebody else again that I've been so glad to have the relative stability and also still some of the flexibility, because stuff has come up that I've like, we got to take care of this. And there's been a foundation to help cover that. And I've been very thankful.
No, absolutely. And I was trying to pull up, just even look through what all because I did not do what you did, which was such a great idea, There's a lot there. If you had to pick one episode that you think was the most, I don't know if I want to say helpful, or inspirational, or what's the word I'm looking for? Revealing. Let's use that word. The most revealing to you.
I actually haven't made it back through this one, but I felt like blessed are those who mourn felt different. Because that was, for me, kind of a culmination of a lot of threads of work that God has been doing in my life over the last couple of years that had needed to happen for almost as long as I've been alive. And so to experience it personally and then get to the point where I feel like I can talk about it publicly. Not that, and I didn't experience any kind of like terrible trauma or anything like that. It's just you realize when you finally come to terms with the strongholds in your life and see them for what they are and call them what they are and admit that you know what needs to happen there, and trying to break out of those patterns of choices and behavior that have kept you in those spots for so long. And you brought a lot of vulnerability as well about your own experiences and situations to that conversation. I felt like we'd never done anything like that before. And so that one really stuck out to me. Yeah. And it was cool for me listening back to, we've said so many times before, it's like, we're just two dudes. I mean, why would anybody pay any attention? Because we're not experts on anything. One of the things, I shot Ryan a text earlier today that said something to the lines of, man, I'm seeing a lot of stuff that we may need to talk about out in the world and online. And just, we talked about certainty on a recent episode. Just like, man, seems like people are so belligerently certain that they know exactly what needs to be happening and what the right thing is. And so I don't feel like we bring that to the table, but at the same time, I feel like we were able to say a lot of the things we were deeply persuaded are true, hopefully in a way that was compelling, getting to unpack the threads in Exodus and Deuteronomy that connect all the way to Christ. That's the stuff I really get passionate about, and really, I guess, really hopeful and excited about maybe being a part of people's exposure to that stuff and understanding that stuff. And there were a few episodes where we really got to dig into some of those deep threads, and I really like that and getting to be a part of it. Yeah, those are the things that kind of stuck out for me. What about you?
Yeah. A lot of similar. I do think that episode was different. And I'd actually kind of thought about that as we were talking about just those years that don't make sense, and even moments I can look back on that. How does this make sense, or come into play when you look at God is good when there's these things that have happened that are bad, and at least that's how we look at it, right? And just thinking back on one of the things I mentioned in that episode, if people are unfamiliar with it, it's the one, "Blessed are those who suck it up," is the episode title. But I talked through just a miscarriage that my wife and I experienced after the birth of our first child, between our first and second, and it was tough. And there's no way I think in my head I will ever be able to make sense of it, but it doesn't really matter if I'm able to or not. And understanding that had a purpose, regardless if I understand it or it's my purpose, right? Because if I wrote the plan, it would be that didn't happen, and that we had 4 kids running around, and but there's other things there that I don't know. It's just different. It doesn't matter what I write. It's what God's doing, and that can be a tough thing, a tough pill to swallow in some ways. But someone mentioned a book. I think it was maybe mentioned at church, but our pastor. But there's a book called "The Moon Is Round," I believe is what it's called. And
The Moon Is Always Round.
Summer had mentioned it, and we bought it. But it talks about how, just like the moon is always round, even though sometimes it appears like the tip of a thumbnail, or more of an oval or whatever. God is always good, even though we don't always see it that way. And
we were talking about that book yesterday, actually.
Were you?
Funny you should mention that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd mentioned it to someone on the phone the other day too, and so it's just that concept of oftentimes the world looks at what God is doing as not good or not fair, and maybe so according to your plan, but put your plan aside, right? Like that's not what God's writing, and that's what we're supposed to be about. And so that episode specifically, and all of the ones with the Beatitudes have been enlightening in different ways. Even just kind of the thread that we've talked about seeing, and and it's just fun to look at it on the flip side in some ways. I say fun, I mean, not in your traditional sense of fun, right? It's not like we're, sitting here cutting up and laughing about it. It's just some of the things that you come across, some of the thoughts, and even looking at the first one, which was blessed are the rich in ego. It's just like, wow, yeah, people do do that, right? And so I mean that was a big one. Of course, as always, talking with Josh is fun.
What's funny is he has another book that was out like 1 day ago, 2 days ago. Yeah. Mine's arriving. My copy's arriving today, so hopefully we'll get to talk to him again this year. We do it every year. Why not again?
That's right. Yeah. Hey, hopefully he enjoys it as much as we do, or at least close to as much. But
he keeps saying yes, so it can't be that bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of them. I mean, even looking back, like, the third one we did this year was that Rotten Fences episode, and just talking about how we're so concerned with what our life looks like on the outside, and inside we may be dying,
Yeah.
But everyone thinks we're fine, and so you don't have the accountability or the buy-in or the community that maybe you need, because you're so, hell-bent on making yourself look great.
Man, and there's the making yourself look great, but then there's the feeling like that's what you're supposed to do, and that there isn't, the whole, we've talked about this, like, so how you doing? Man, I'm making it, whatever. My wife was talking to me yesterday about a conversation she had with somebody last week, I think it was, and it was like that. It's like, how you doing? It's like, I'm making it. And she stopped a moment and she said, are you really? And the person was not making it, it turns out, and that turned into a very vulnerable conversation. And it's not always. It's funny. I mean, there's the kind of casual expression of it, but then even with the people who are close to you, sometimes it can feel easier to not go there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we've talked about that, probably not this year as much, but in the past, of just like the inconvenience it is if you do have to go there, right? And the shortcuts we take to make sure we don't have to do all that. And I don't know. I think there's a blessing there if you're willing to be inconvenienced. Not that it's about that blessing, but I think God's going to take your willingness and your ability to be in the place He's put you in, and He's going to use it to help someone, first of all, which is a blessing to them, but He's going to continue to bless you if you're willing to bless others with that, and it's an outpouring of His goodness in your life. Doesn't mean it's always fun,
No, it's often not.
Yeah. And sometimes it can be downright scary, but I don't know. I think it's one of those things you have to start looking at things. It's like when you have moments where, be it God giving you allowing you to have a raise in your job. Again, that's not always necessarily even God. I think you have to look at the ability that there is, Satan does have power in this world, and it would be very easy for him to lure you with more money, right?
Yeah.
And to allow you to stay where you are with that. And so that's a real thing. And maybe he uses that more so than God to bless us. I think God's blessing is oftentimes different than that. But
can confirm.
Was that?
Can confirm.
Yeah. And so, but I think, there's times when if that happens, it's like, okay, well then what with this? Because if it's to help you build your kingdom, then there's a problem. But if it's a way for you to bless others, then look for that and try to, and don't try and hoard it. And that can be tough for me. I laugh about it. The more, successful I've been in my career, and the older I've gotten, and the more I've had, the stingier I've gotten with it. And so I'm constantly battling this, need to, not that it's bad to save or to do so, but I have to constantly battle that and, look at what is God wanting me to do with this. And
there's a difference between saving and hoarding.
There is. You're right. You are correct. There's a big difference there. But I even think we had, goodness, it's probably been a year or two ago, like something small, like going through McDonald's on vacation. We were in Branson, and we're going through, and we open our bag, and there's like extra stuff that we didn't order. And I'm like, well, what do I do with this? Like, okay, kids, you can have maybe an extra cheeseburger, trying to figure out. And then we pull out, and there's a guy on the corner.
Yeah.
Homeless with a sign. And it's like, oh, okay. Because they're not going to take the food back at McDonald's, right? Like they're not allowed to. Yeah. And so it was one of those things where it didn't look like the best situation. I'm going to be honest, and maybe that's wrong for me to say, but I pulled around the corner and parked away, and they locked the car, and I took it back and had a moment to talk and pray with people that I would not have had I not been given 3 extra cheeseburgers or whatever it was, Yeah. And so it's like, okay, this happened. What do I do with that? And I think if that's like on top of our mind in every instance in life, our life is going to be very different, as opposed to, oh man, I got more. How do I use this to, build my portfolio or whatever?
Yeah. I had a similar situation recently in which I was able to help somebody with something, and it was as a result of obedience to something, like that I was considering whether or not I wanted to stay committed to, or and it was like I was reflecting with my wife after the fact. It's like, if I hadn't done that thing, if I hadn't continued to do that thing, I don't know that this opportunity to be a help to somebody would have come along. Yeah.
And it's tough because I think the world screams at us to make sure that we are feeling, and it's, I'll say something else after this because I don't want to be taken the wrong way, but I think the world tells us to make sure we feel purpose and, what's the word I'm looking for? Like confirmed in our position, even with work. Like, oh, well, if they're not, doing this, and that for you, well, then you should leave. Well, maybe. And I'm not saying that's completely wrong. Like, hopefully you do have a sense of purpose where you're at. But if that's all you're pursuing and it's the purpose that you're looking for, then that's different than looking for the purpose God may have you somewhere. And
yeah, maybe your purpose is to endure crappiness for a greater purpose that God hasn't yet revealed to you. My wife is a nurse, and she worked at a hospital for over a decade. And, the work is hard anyway, but sometimes the job is hard too, depending on your work situation and colleagues and all that kind of thing. And there were times where she was really like, man, I just don't want to do this anymore, but did not feel the release of the Spirit to leave. And the way that she made sense of it was that, like, there are many things about this I may not enjoy or that are hard, or somebody else might take as confirmation that I shouldn't be here. But sometimes the Lord calls us to difficult things that don't make sense. And the only confirmation you have is the little whisper that you have to listen carefully to while your brain is shouting at you every other thing in the world. But it's that little whisper that will keep you on the road you're supposed to be on. And it's why, even things like we started this conversation talking about just figuring out ways to inject rest into your rhythm, actual rest, not just escape, which is different. Yeah. And that if you don't rest, if you don't have those rhythms, if you don't give yourself time for God to speak to your brain that's not engaged with something else, how can we hear that voice? How can we hear that, or how can we feel that nudge, if you like?
Yeah. I think that actual rest thing, that's important, because I think more and more we're inundated with things around us that will take our attention if we give it. Mm-hmm. And they're not always nor often very beneficial to who we are as people. And I don't know, that's something I'm more and more aware of as kids get older, just the things that are competing for their attention. My daughter, we got her a Kindle for her birthday, and she loves the thing. Like,
Too
it's
much,
the Kindle
right?
Kids, so it's, what's that?
Too much, right?
Too much, maybe, yeah, because, she already doesn't like to stay up. We've had to put a bedtime on the thing, and then there's times where she's like, well, I didn't hit my daily goal, and I'm like, okay, I'll extend it, but please go finish. Because she just loves to read, and she may have 5 books going at a time, but, and it's a Kindle Kid, so it's somewhat protected. If you're looking for something as a kid's gift for someone that loves to read, I think it's a great deal. But there's stuff at times that she'll download, and I'm like, hold up, let me look at this. And I mean, you can find whatever you want out there. And so, like, just the idea of raising kids in a somewhat, I hate to say like overprotected, but in a safe way, in a way that's safe for them and their spiritual, like for their soul that God has given them to be nurtured, is not always easy.
Yeah.
I mean, there's even some streaming platforms that I originally canceled, and now I've got like a cheap offer with ads, and I'm like, you know what, we're just going to be very, very careful with it. But some of the stuff that platforms or studios or whatever are putting out are not good for your children. Now you can have teaching moments with it, and we've talked about that. Maybe that was this year.
It was, yeah.
Sorry, I went on a little soapbox, so I'll try to bring it back in a little bit. But yeah, so that's kind of looking back. I mean, you mentioned there's a lot this year. Mm-hmm. As we look at what's going to be season 4. What are you most excited to kind of talk through and look at and explore more? Obviously, we have the Beatitudes that we're going to be wrapping up soon, but
we'll see if we wrap it up soon.
Wrapping up at some point.
That's a good question, because I hadn't thought a ton about this year. We've said before that we'd like to get some more guests in. And that sometimes is logistically difficult, finding times that work for everybody when this isn't your main gig. We've talked about wanting to see the podcast grow, whatever that means exactly. I suppose what I hope for this year, and really in any year, is that I don't want to continue to just say the same things. Like we have a certain wheelhouse, I feel like, but it's pretty broad. And so there were particular things we did this past year that I thought, this is new for us. We're pushing beyond, like we didn't talk about that this year or the previous year, or that's a totally different take on something. I know we end up looping back into earlier conversations quite a bit, because I feel like really this is one long conversation that people are privy to. So, but that said, I'd like to continue to talk about things we haven't talked about, and hopefully try to get to some clarity or hopefully to some wisdom just for the two of us on those things. And maybe that could be helpful to people. Beyond that, I don't want to set some kind of like business goal for what we're doing. Just that, you know, I want to keep doing it, and I want it to keep being helpful in new ways.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's big, and I'm with you. You know, it's one of those things that this is enjoyable just to do and to have these conversations. And often I think there's kind of things that are revealed to us that God uses our conversations to reveal to us that are helpful. But
yeah,
I'm with you. The vulnerability in the episode over Blessed Are Those Who Mourn, kind of that one, is something I think is beneficial to continue and is maybe contradictory to our thought process when we started, of wanting to kind of keep behind the scenes and not share too much, and because we don't want it to be about us. And we're still of that mindset, like we don't matter in this equation. But that said, the experiences we've had and where God places us does often matter. And so I think it's useful, but
I don't want to be reticent to talk about the work God has done in my life, if that could be encouraging or helpful or sharpening for another person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because he's right there, man.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, I don't know, I think everything going on, so to your point, things you're seeing, which we have not talked about fully what those are, so I'm intrigued about some of the things you're seeing. But even knowing that this year is a big year, being an election year, and there's going to be a lot of tension, you know, and to your point, I think we've shied away often from politics, and this year we've probably touched on it a little more than in the past. Not because we love politics, but just because how do you ignore the stuff, you know?
Yeah. It's how Babylon runs.
Yeah.
And there are even some things, like when I sent you that message, there's some things that, frankly, I'm a little, I don't know that afraid is the right word, but like, I don't know if I want to go there or not. I don't know if I want to wade into some of these waters, not because I mind difficult conversations. It's just that it's so easy to be misinterpreted in the marketplace of ideas when there's not a personal relationship to undergird the conversation. Like we've mentioned a couple of times in more recent episodes that, you know, you and I are friends, and so even any disagreeing we do takes place in the context of like, I care deeply for you and you care deeply for me, and each other's families and whatnot, and that's the thing that we have that can carry the weight of a disagreement and a misunderstanding even. I don't think that's happened, but it might. You know, we're human. But people out there in the world that might be listening to this don't have that. And so I'm like, some of the stuff that I'm seeing out there that I might have want to talk about is like, I don't know that I want to risk the chance of being misunderstood and thrown into this camp or that pod or the other by wading into this conversation. And I don't know if that's a character flaw or if that's me just, you know, being a wimp or whatever, but it's like, man, I earnestly desire for these conversations to be constructive. And, you know, I don't always know which pool we should be wading into.
And there's that good faith thing of like, even when we maybe have disagreements or are misunderstood, if there's times I hear something, it's like, well, I know Taylor. So even though this was said, you know, it's not an attack, or he's not. We're just having a conversation, and you know. And again, I don't know that there's ever been that, but I know because of the relationship we have, there's that good faith, to where it's not just like you're trying to get your point in, but we're trying to have the discussion. I think if you don't have that, it can be tough. You know, I had a conversation this week. Related to work, where someone had reached out and they were talking about a contract in place that hasn't been paid, and they're like, hey, you know, these people aren't acting in good faith. We need this done before we pay. And I'm like, no, that's not how it works. You pay and they offer the service they said contractually they will offer, right? Like that's how it works. And it's funny, you know, we don't have a written contract in place, but there's this idea of what we're trying to do is beneficial to each other and others who may be listening or a part of the conversation. And if we say something that goes against it, hopefully there's enough of an understanding there to know it wasn't an intentional blow at someone. And that's just very prevalent in the world today, that anything said can be taken out of context. So I don't think it's wimpy. I think there's a lot of wisdom there, to stick with a W word. But I think that's wise to consider that. Now, again, you do have me interested. So I'm like, I'm kind of fishing for a teaser here of what those topics may be, but you may not be ready to even cast one out.
No, I don't think I will.
Oh, man. And I think, one of the things looking backward and ahead, and with everything we just said that people aren't hearing right now, but will, I think it's worthwhile enough to work in at some point, or maybe that's our year. But I think, there's kind of this trajectory of what we've hoped to do, which is slowly align ourselves more with Christ. Yeah. And I think, that's what all of this is. And hopefully this year, looking ahead, it'll be another step in that, because we even the whole point of our title, Unbetween, is focused on finding that place. It's not so much that we're trying to be against one political side or the other. We're trying to be in line with Christ. And what we're understanding is oftentimes that does not look like what the world looks like. And hopefully the past year and looking ahead, that's what we continue to do. I know that's been true for me in my life in many ways, but
yeah. And the other part of it is, it isn't just committing to this ephemeral, non-existent middle ground to avoid taking a side, and it's not disengaging from the conversation either. It's, we want to find the middle way of Jesus wherever it leads, and to follow it as best we can.
Yep, which we did an episode around that too.
We did.
Whose side are we on anyway?
Yeah.
Which is, I think, will continue to be a question that we should ask. And if it's if we identify more with a political side or a cultural group or some societal, I don't know even how to word any of this, to be honest, but than we do with Christ, then there's a big issue there. So in the way of outro, maybe we just need to. Can you sum up what we just said in one sentence?
We are Unbetween, and so can you.
That's it. Follow us on social.
Happy 2024, everybody.